down there. It looks like I'm just ghosted in there. Oh, there we go. So welcome, one and all, as always, to the Wednesday live stream. This evening, we're going to be talking about levelling up. Why the Tories actually have a good idea, but for whatever reason, which we'll probably get into later on, they just won't do it. And not only that, this is something that will almost certainly guarantee that they lose the red wall in the coming next general election. In fact, I've said this before, going all the way back to the Cameron years, the idea of the Northern Powerhouse, where you really, really invest into the North like a whole heap of money, would have been a really good idea. And, you know, to say this, as we always say this, whenever they seem to say something right, you know, they are a broken clock, and you know, a broken clock can be right twice a day. But of course, we'll be getting into all the levelling up nonsense later. We'll be going over the government's, or at least peeking in on one of the very interesting things to talk about, which is the devolution idea of levelling up, which is something Michael Gove really wants to push, which would be quite interesting if it did actually happen. But of course, devolution without the money to, well, back up any of those on any of these projects is, well, it's useless, really. But before we do get into that, we're going to have a follow-up. So you may remember a couple of weeks ago, we covered George Galloway with a guy called Gonzalo Lira, who is, shall we say, more colloquially known on YouTube as Coach Red Pill, because, well, he's had some very interesting adventures in Ukraine very recently. So we'll be covering what really recently happened to him, and, well, laughing at his expense, because quite frankly, he's one of these people who really deserves what happens. And trust me, we'll be getting into his story in a moment. But before we begin, good evening to everyone, one and all. Like I say, welcome to this evening's Wednesday live stream. Like I say, in the chat so far, we've got Simon Says 55. We've also got Cathal OG. Evening to you both. And welcome to everyone else who's, I can see, sort of lurking deep behind the chat, as they say. So let's go diving into this YouTube video, because as always, these are... Hang on, because I've forgotten to put me headphones in. These are always fun to say, but just to Simon Carr, why? Good evening to you. Pretty Bird, greetings to you. Simon Carr, good afternoon. So, yeah, as always, like I say, you may remember us covering him last couple of weeks ago when we were on when we're covering George Galloway, and this was the guy that George Galloway was citing as an expert for some reason on all things Ukraine. There we go.
But of course, he was anything but, so to say. Hang on, let me just check.
There we go. Oh. There we go. It always does that every time I put my speakers in. It wants to change over to this thing. I put them in, but yeah. So yeah, you may remember us covering here this guy a couple of weeks back. Like I say, he's more commonly known on YouTube. Goes by the moniker of one Coach Red Bill, Gonzalo Lira. Yeah. But yeah, that guy. And basically, if you may remember, this was the guy who was saying that Russia was conducting a gentlemanly war. Of course, a week later, we would find out about what was going on in things in obviously Bucha and the massacre that the Russians have been doing there. Also, we found out that a lot of shall we say, of sexual violence has been committed against the women of Ukraine by these Russian soldiers, essentially using that as a weapon. Unfortunately, like I say, these war crimes just keep on piling up. But that's what happens when Putin and of course the leaders in the military try to dehumanize these people in Ukraine. But it appears to be that these are the consequences of when that happens. What's this? Catholic G. Galloway has gone to court in Dublin, unhappy with his Twitter badge as a Russian state-sponsored media. Oh, that will be quite fun. We will have to follow that with interest. Because Alexander, good evening to you. Coming from Westphalia, which is Poland, I want to say. Oh no, Germany. Is it Germany? I remember it from the Treaty of Westphalia or something like that. I don't know, but yes. Guten Abend to all the Germans watching us out there. So let's go watching this, because like I say, I think if you may remember, if you refreshed your mind who this essentially guy is. So we'll go diving into this. But actually, no, quickly before this, obviously you may not have seen what he was posting on his Twitter, so we've got to fill you in what he was doing on there as well. Since the invasion, he's been posting some very, well, not very, he's been posting pro-Russian basic propaganda straight from the Russian Foreign Ministry and the Ministry of Defense. And he has posted some absolutely crazy stuff. He has posted a picture saying that the Ukrainian military are essentially stacking buildings with civilians on purpose to use them as human shields, with a awful picture of a PowerPoint picture, which anyone could make in 5 seconds. Needless to say, obviously, most of the stuff that he has been spouting has been proven false. And if you may remember, shortly when we covered him, he had just been thrown out of a hotel in Kiev for, well, his, shall we say, pro-Russian stance. Not only that, but he was going around Kharkiv, which is, again, on the front lines in all of this, basically posting pictures of well, there's what's the best way to describe it? He was basically posting pictures of, so we say, Ukrainian positions and basically anything he could against Ukraine. And of course, what happens? What happens when you are essentially in Ukraine, whether Ukrainians are currently holding against the Russians, and you're doing this type of stuff? Obviously, sooner or later, the Ukrainians were going to do something, and indeed something they did. It looks like they arrested him on charges of spying. And essentially since then, he's gone into a sort of mad panic mode that, Zelensky's trying to get him. Yeah, that's the type of stuff he's been posting. So anyway, we'll just go on into this, and you can see the video for yourself.
Redacted. I wanted to give you an update on a story we've been covering here on the Redacted show over the past week and a half or so, and that is the missing journalist Gonzalo Lira, the Chilean journalist. He's also an American citizen who is in Kharkov in Ukraine, who has been covering a lot of the corruption of the Zelensky regime.
I want to say he's not a journalist. Like a lot of these people who have been like using him as like a source of like doing this as like an actual journalistic source. He is not a journalist in any way, shape, or form. I want to stress that. This guy is he's basically a pickup artist. It's in the name, Coach Red Pill. So that's, and again, he's been used as like this journalistic source, especially by people like this guy in this channel that we're watching here, as some sort of like authoritative source on this. And of course, you saw what he said on George Galloway program of, remember, he said Russia had been conducting a gentlemanly war. So yeah, Guy pretty much deserved what we're going to be hearing basically happened to him.
Stories that you're not going to hear in the Western media, largely silenced by the Western media. And these stories.
He's a no one. Like, I want to make that very clear. The whole reason why you haven't been hearing this in the Western media, he's a no one on this.
These are absolutely important. For instance, Gonzalo was one of the first people to report that the Zelensky government was, before the war broke out, was arming convicted criminals, letting them out of prison and arming them with heavy weapons. The reporting, of course, unfolded before the Russians even came there. They were going street by street by street, rounding up other gangs, rival gangs, and shooting them, killing them. This was all reported by Gonzalo Lira and confirmed by other journalists in Ukraine. Again, silence.
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. Why on earth would you say this? Like, this isn't true. Like, this is just straight up not true. What on earth is he talking about? Again, this is like I say, remember, we are stepping back into the bizarre world of people who think that essentially the Western media is lying to you, except for some reason Russian state media, which is controlled exactly the same way that they claim Western media is. And yet they're the ones telling the truth. But Russia's news sources aren't. Remember that. Yeah.
By the mainstream media. Last Friday, he went missing. We've been covering it here on the show. We do have some good news today, some wonderful news. And that is that Gonzalo Lira is alive. And just a short time ago, rather just like a few minutes ago, managed to speak to Alex Cristoforo on his show. He had his computer taken, his phone taken, and managed to get a message out to Alex. And so they were able to broadcast this message. I want to play it for you, but I want you to watch it very closely because there are a couple of things that stand out to me as very odd. Now, he admits that he was captured. He was taken. No, he says he was picked up by the Ukrainian security forces, the SB.
Yes, because he was a guy who was walking around Kharkiv spouting pro-Russian propaganda, taking photos in and around, Kharkiv, and saying that this was a Ukrainian storage facility. What? What? What on earth? What did he think was going to happen? Because we already saw what happened when he was in Kiev, and he got kicked out of a hotel for spouting pro-Russian nonsense. What did he think was going to happen?
The intelligence and security forces of Ukraine. He was picked up and then had his electronic devices taken from him, gone, missing. So here's what he has to say about that. I want to get your perspective on this in the comments below. But here is that moment.
Put you on. It's what is it? Friday, April 20th. Friday already. Yeah, a week. April 22nd, 2022. I'm in Kharkov. I'm okay. I just want to say that I'm back online, and I'm here with Alex Christoforou, and I just want to say that I'm fine physically. I'm a little rattled. I was picked up by the SBU on Friday, April 15th at a little after 1 p.m. local time.
Good. Good. He was an idiot enough to be a pro-Russian propagandist behind Ukrainian lines. The fact that he got picked up And basically, far worse stuff could have happened to him. You know, it's any wonder that he's alive. Pretty Birds brings up a good point. This may all have been just a very clever propaganda piece by him, because you're right. Sure doesn't act like someone detained for a week. You are right. He doesn't act like someone who's been, detained for a week, considering the fact that, again, he's apparently had, his phone and computer taken away, probably because, again, they think he's a spy. Because, like I say, he was wandering around Kharkiv, posting, photos of, like, Ukrainian positions and saying this is going on in Kharkiv. What did you think was going to happen, dude? Like, what did you think was going to happen? Yeah, he acts like someone pulling a fast one. Yeah, I wouldn't. I agree with you. This guy's a grifter. He's a known grifter. So I would not be surprised if it comes out in like a couple of days or so that this is that it was fake. That all of this is just some massive grift to get attention. Wouldn't surprise me. It really wouldn't surprise me. That would fit very well, to be honest, with his MO. To be honest,
I'm okay physically. I'm a little rattled. There seems to have been like a lot of interest in my case, which is wonderful.
So I just want to stop it there. I was picked up by the Ukrainian security forces. Picked up. We haven't heard from you for a week. And then he goes,
What? Wait. What do you think happens? What do you think happens when you get picked up by the Ukrainian security forces, especially with the type of stuff that he's been posting again on Twitter and on his Facebook page and stuff like that? What do you think was going to happen? I'm at a loss for words, but what did you think was going to happen?
Goes on to sort of deflect and just talk about other people on his Twitter stream, the people that have actually have been killed and are gone missing. And he deflects humbly and he pushes it away from him. Hey, don't focus on me, Gonzalo. Let me talk about the people that have gone missing and then are dead now. Let's do that. But why so quick to get off the subject about the security forces rounding you up and being picked up? Something's going on.
Thank you.
Something's going on. Yeah, it's probably a massive grift. That's what's going on. That's what's going on. But yeah, I don't know if we want to be honest, watch the rest of this now. Like I say, we've got better things to be talking about this evening. And to be honest, this guy is a massive grifter. I wouldn't be surprised if this entire event has been staged. If he was picked up by like the security services, why would he be out? And if he's had his stuff taken away, surely he wouldn't be allowed to do this. So again, the more and more you look into like his story, the more and more this doesn't make sense. I think massive grift. I think you're right, Pretty Bird. I think this is massive grift by this guy. Absolute massive grift. Sorry, Galloway's only threatened Twitter with going to High Court as of yet. Hold on, let's bring that up. I want to see what he's been tweeting, because I know he tweeted to Elon Musk very recently. In fact, all the rights, the free speeches have been going crazy about Elon Musk trying to do this. Let's get. Oh no, here it is. There's a story here in the Irish Times. Yeah. In fact, let's go over this. Why not? Why not? It's good to, you know, it's good to go over these people again. Remind you just what massive gristers are. Because I guarantee you, this guy is going to be putting together a GoFundMe. You know, help me fund me. You know, sue Twitter, and then all of a sudden it goes, well, we tried to sue them, but you know they've got far too big a lawyers, and all that money they raised from the GoFundMe mysteriously goes missing. You know, or I used it all on something else. Like I say, the grift is definitely strong with Galloway. Here we are. Here we are. Yeah, Irish Times. Former British PM. Former British PM. Christ no. Former British MP plans to sue Twitter in Dublin over his Russian label. Let's dive into this. George Galloway lawyers tell social media firm they intend to take the case to High Court. What's now this? 21 hours ago. Lawyers for the former British MP George Galloway have told Twitter that he intends to sue the firm in a High Court in Dublin over his account being labelled Russian state-affiliated media. Interesting that he is suing in Dublin, but of course, those of you who may or may not know, Dublin is actually the place to sue people internationally. I don't know why, but there you go. So that's probably why he's suing them in Dublin. The KRW Law, the Belfast law practice that is representing Mr. Galloway, wrote to Twitter's European head office in Dublin, that way also my boy as well, on Tuesday, telling the social media company that they intend to sue in High Court over proceedings over the label attached to his Twitter account. Interesting, because all Twitter has to do, if I'm remembering this right, all Twitter has to do is basically show the multiple times George Galloway has been on RT, the number of times that he has posters. And we'll remember this a few weeks ago when this story initially broke. People showing you the RT poster from like their Facebook page with him on. You know, all they have to do is a request for discovery. You know, show us your financial records. Prove you've never been paid by RT. That's all they have to do. That's all they have to do. The former MP's radio program, the mother of all talk shows, has has been broadcast on Russian state-owned radio Sputnik service and can also be viewed on YouTube online. The Scottish broadcaster and former parliamentarian who served as an MP for almost 30 years denies working for Russian state media. He has more than 43,000 followers on Twitter. Remember, we know that George Galloway was one of the highest people paid by Russia Today because of the, again, when MPs get any money from doing anything, they have to register it. They have to say, oh, yeah, by the way, I did this. I got paid X amount. Galloway was one of the highest paid members of parliament to be paid by Russia Today. Not only that, but ever since the war in Ukraine, he has been covering several and pushing several stories. We've covered them when we're looking at George Galloway. We might have to go back to him maybe in a couple of weeks. I keep on saying I want to cover Andre Walker, see what he's saying about all this, because I for one was quite surprised when he was like actually came out against Galloway. He warned Twitter earlier this month that unless the label was removed, he would sue the company. The letter from his lawyers marks an escalation of his dispute with the internet firm that is to be taken over by billionaire Elon Musk and a $41 billion euro announced on Monday. KLR told Twitter in a letter that it had failed to receive a proper response from the company. We intend to issue high court proceedings in Dublin and reserve the right to institute proceedings elsewhere, as set out in our detailed letter of claim. The firm told Twitter's lawyers. Please confirm whether the quote Twitter International Unlimited Company, the company's Dublin subsidiary, requires Irish proceedings to be served on their regulatory offices, or whether the firm is authority to serve proceedings elsewhere. Twitter, of course, has declined to comment. That court case is going to be interesting. That court case is going to be very, very interesting because it's going to be interesting what defense Galloway actually uses here. I'm sorry, Your Honor, I didn't realize I happened to be, broadcasting on RT today. And not only that, you can just go to his channel and you can look at the number of like guests that he has from RT. And like I say, all Twitter has to do is look back and just do a request for discovery. Show us your earnings. An interesting question, of course, question to ask is, hey George, why were you the most highest paid member of Parliament by Russia Today? Just a question, George. Just a question. Oh, good evening to you as well. But yeah, interesting. Thanks for bringing this to this attention. We're definitely going to have to see how this evolves, because that could be quite interesting, to say the least. That could be very, very interesting indeed. Not only that, but George Galloway has to be sort of careful, because one of the richest men on the planet has now bought Twitter. Twitter might suddenly have a lot of money to be able to fire back at him. So certainly could make for a very interesting court case. Although I am sort of praying that this comes back to haunt Galloway. I really, really am. But also expect this to become part of his grift of, help me sue Twitter or whatever. I wouldn't be surprised if he's already at it now. To be honest. Let's actually see if we can find his Twitter account. Here we are. Nothing yet. He hasn't posted about anything yet, which is a shame. I was hoping he might have. But never mind. Never mind. Anyway, right. Let's get on with this. Yeah, Elon Musk buying Twitter is going to be an absolute nightmare, because Musk put it from someone who comes from who's a marketing background, who works in marketing, who knows about community content moderation. Musk does not seem to understand the difference between free speech and moderating of content. There needs to be that line. Otherwise, trust me, what is going to happen? Twitter's going to become an absolute hellscape. You're going to scare off a ton of advertisers, and then all of a sudden, Musk's going to start rolling in like moderation, and then people are going to go, Elon Musk is killing my free speech. I'm putting that call in now. I'm putting that call in now for a future video. But yeah, Musk buying Twitter, another billionaires playing rich people's games. Yeah. Oh, Mark Pearson, hello to you. And A Hashmulter, hello to you. So let's go diving in to this. Oh, what this porn in the House of Commons. I haven't, like I say, I've literally just come on air. I haven't heard too much about it, but we'll see. Yeah, well then Twitter will just wither away and die. Good riddance. Probably. I mean, people will just go to something else. People forget that's what happened with MySpace. The big reason why Facebook took over from MySpace was because MySpace, Facebook had a lot more better content moderation than MySpace did. So people just flowed on over from MySpace at the time. I mean, if you remember back in the day, MySpace was like the place to be in terms of like the early sort of social media places. And then of course Facebook comes along with sort of better, again, content moderation, because you could post all sorts of nonsense on MySpace, all sorts. That's why MySpace lost. That's why it lost out to Facebook. Poor Tom and his MySpace page. God, I think I still have. I think my MySpace profile, I think, might be still up. I don't know. I've never checked it. I'll have to go and have a look one day, just so it is. Yeah, Bebo forever. I remember. No, Bebo was for chavs. The cool kids went to MySpace. The chavs went to Bebo. Yeah, poor Tom. It's not poor at all. Yeah, very true. Very true. I think he did probably make a whole lot of money off MySpace when it was certainly at its peak. That certainly is true. So yeah, not so poor Tom. But yes, let us go diving into here. So this, as you can see, this is the leveling up white paper, because we're talking about leveling up this evening. Why won't the Tories do it? Don't know why, but leveling up, everyone agrees the idea of leveling up, good idea. But the Tories won't do it. Primary reason, spending money. They have to spend a whole lot of money, not just for short-term goals, but we're talking like medium and long-term projects. And they do not want to spend that money and potentially lose an election, So let's go into this, because this is actually kind of shocking, because you've got, like I think we talked about this before, about the first two chapters of this being very good and getting quite accurately what is actually really wrong. certainly with like British industry and sort of why it hasn't been working, and identifying why that hasn't been working, and saying, how it needs to spend all this money and get stuff moving again. And then you get to the money part, and it's just not enough money. It's pennies when they should be spending pounds, essentially. And don't get me wrong, we're talking like, a couple of 100 million, but you need to be spending far, far more than that to really make, shall we say, make a proper difference and actually level up these areas that you claim you want to do. So here we go. This is the infamous paper. Hang on, there we go. So you can see it all. There we go. So the United Kingdom is an unparalleled success story. A multicultural, multi-nation, multi-ethnic state with the world's best broadcaster. Interesting, First of all, multi-ethnic. There's certainly a lot of people, Tories in particular, who seem to be very, very, very upset about the state of multinationalism here in the UK, especially. But of course, the world's best broadcaster. Yeah, we've got the world's best broadcaster. Why? Because we've got all the, it's a government-funded station. It has the license fee, which helps fund the BBC. The BBC does a whole lot of really good stuff. World's best broadcaster. But what are the Tories constantly doing? Attacking, again and again and again. So much for having the world's best broadcaster. Not only that, Channel 4 as well. It is a publicly owned but privately run organization. Has done fantastic work throughout the years. What is Nadine Dorries doing? She's selling it, or at least trying to sell it. Again, that is going to be a massive, massive hit to the cultural and art sector and the creative sector here in the UK. Especially, I think it's like 197 different businesses rely on there being a Channel 4, on like Channel 4 existing as it does. Then again, Channel 4 set up by Margaret Thatcher, and yet the Tories getting rid of it, getting shot of it. Interesting enough, it's going to be it's certainly going to be interesting when that vote comes up in Parliament. Yes, very true. All hail Sir David Attenborough. Very true. Where are we? So, the world's best broadcaster, a vibrant creative arts sector. Once again, doing everything they can to try and destroy that very vibrant creative arts sector. A national health service which guarantees care for every citizen. Again, they're doing fantastic jobs at trying to destroy that. Charities and voluntary groups which perform 1 million acts of kindness daily. Again, while it is good that we have charity and voluntary groups, I am very much of a position where I would love to see a lack of third sector, like a charity sector, not because we don't need it or anything like that, but because these charities are no longer needed. That's why I would love to live in a Britain like that, where we didn't need these charities because there is no need for them. Exactly the same how I feel about food banks. I would love to be there at the closing of the very last food bank because it is no longer needed here in the UK. A globally renowned scientist exceeding the boundaries of knowledge every year. Again, doing fantastic strides in destroying that. Entrepreneurs developing products and services which bring joy and jobs to so many. Again, entrepreneurs certainly are not very happy at your Brexit deal, so kudos to that, lads. And millions of citizens whose kindness and compassion have been so powerfully displayed during the COVID-19 pandemic. And yes, you did a fantastic job during that pandemic, didn't you? Of course. But not everyone shares in the UK's success. Remember, this came out of a Tory group. This had to have been signed off by Michael Gove. So very, very interesting indeed. While talent is spread equally across the country, opportunity is not. Again, very interesting admission. Leveling up is a mission to challenge and change that unfairness. Leveling up means giving everyone the opportunity to flourish. It also means you actually have to put your money where your mouth is and actually fund the stuff. But of course, as we know, they don't, and we'll get to that in a moment. It means people everywhere living for longer, living more fulfilling lives, and of course, benefiting from sustained rises in living standards and well-being. And of course, bearing in mind that we're in a cost of living crisis at the moment, wonderful, wonderful times. This requires us to end the geographical inequality, which is such a striking feature of the UK. It needs to begin by improving the economic dynamism and the innovation to drive growth across the whole country, unleashing the power of the private sector. Again, I think the private sector should be involved to a point. I think this is very, very much dependent on like the public sector and the government investing in these areas to help the private sector achieve a lot of this stuff. The decarbonisation of the steel industry, we talk about that a lot. If the government were to actually seriously do that, it would take some time to do. The steel industry has expressed their desire to want to do that, but they cannot do that by themselves because it would cost far, far too much money for them to do it by themselves, something that they cannot do. They need government support to do it. But if they did it, it would secure jobs. It would secure everything in those steel industries and areas around. Where were we? Private sector jobs to unlock opportunity for all. While there are, again, world-leading enterprising businesses and innovators right across the UK, economic growth and the high productivity which drives it has been concentrated in specific areas, particularly the southeast of England, and a long tail of low productivity businesses and places explain why the UK productivity growth is too low compared to competitors. It's shocking that they actually admit this, and that this has sort of come from remember, this has come from Michael Gove's cabinet office. He's had to sign off on this, which is, again, all of this is very interesting admissions, because the Tories have presided over very much all of this. They've been at the wheel far longer than this. They say this has been obviously going on, for a couple of decades. And over those, quote, couple of decades that they mentioned, they have been at the wheel of this. And of course, not excusing Labour. Of course, Labour should bear some of the blame for not doing, I think, enough to help level up some of those places as well. They did do a lot for education. Let's not deny that. But they can't be, shall we say, fully blameless in the, shall we say, the lack of leveling up and opportunities that sort of are around. But like I say, there are new policies in Labour that are very, very good. The Green New Deal that Rachel Riley has been bringing forward, she would be easily the most greenest chancellor we've ever had in office if Labour got into power. So it is vital that we preserve and enhance the economic, academic, and cultural success stories of the UK's most productive countries, towns, and cities. But it is equally critical that we improve productivity, boost economic growth, encourage innovation, create good jobs, enhance educational attainment, and renovate the social and cultural fabric of those parts of the UK that have stalled and not, so far, shared equally in all our nation's success. Again, very, very interesting admissions around that. Very, very interesting admissions around that. And it does say stuff that we've heard before about stuff. Some of them are true that they've done, but their economic benefits are somewhat doubtful. But the interesting one I want to get to. Here it is. The systems change. There has been no shortage of attempts to try and tackle geographical disparities in the UK over the past century. These have been insufficient and close to widening the gaps. And of course, that is because these efforts have tended to be short-term, lack scale and coordination, and were hamstrung by a lack of data and an effective oversight. Local leaders have also lacked the power and accountabilities to design and deliver effective policies for tackling local problems and supporting local people. Again, partly because, especially for the past at least decade or so, the Tories just haven't funded local councils. In fact, especially Labour councils, they've cut their funding even more so and far, far deeper. The direction of travel since 2010 has been towards greater local empowerment, with the introduction of the Localism Act, the police and crime commissioners, the city deals, and of course, democratically elected metro mayors, which again, 13 out of the 11 metro mayors are Labour mayors. Let's not forget that. Hence why, once again, they are changing the voting rules in which these, shall we say, mayors are going to be elected. I'm wondering why they're changing the election rules. Of course, but a renewed coordinated focus is now needed to take this forward. So we could honestly go through all this to death. We could just spend the rest of the stream going through that, but we're not going to. I'd rather go through two interesting articles that lead up into this. First one is going to be via the current Northern mayors that talk about levelling up and their frustration in the fact that the government has failed to actually level up. Then we're also going to, after that, we're going to take a look at a Yorkshire Bylines piece about how Wakefield has actually suffered under the Conservatives. Yeah, exactly. They're not going to do any of that anyways. Yeah. Like I say, when you actually read this, it's a shocking admission. The first two sort of chapters in this are a shocking admission coming from a Conservative government admitting that past Conservative governments have actually failed to help the UK economically. And bearing in mind, this comes out from a Conservative minister that had to have been signed off by him. It's pretty stark in its admissions and what it says. And then, of course, you get to the funding part at the end, and that's where Rishi Sunak has come in and just, carved out that funding with a knife, because it says in some of these parts about this funding, about, I think it says, metro mayors would need X amount of money, but when you go to actually the funding, they're getting far, far less than what the paper actually says they need. Hence why you may remember late last year, before this was released, you saw the big fight that was meant to be going on behind the scenes between Michael Gove and Rishi Sunak over this exact paper. Remember, this paper itself was delayed 3 times because Sunak would refuse to give some of these projects and some of the goals for this levelling up. Remember, this is meant to be like the government's flagship policy, levelling up. And yet here they are making admissions that this is what we need to do, but we're not going to spend the money to actually do what we've told you what we need to do. Honestly, it makes fascinating reading. And if you're into sort of looking into sort of governmental policy or anything like that, and you want a bit of a midnight reading session, worth a read. But anyway, let's move on. To this. Because very recently there was a conference with the sort of northern mayors, and they got together, a conference called Connected North, and they constantly in this paper, or this article reporting about this, constantly talked about the frustration of the government making all these noises, all this really positive talk about leveling up, but whenever they went to the government to say, hey, you've been talking about all this stuff, time to actually, deliver. You've been talking about, oh yeah, we're going to get this extra money. Well, where's this extra money? Oh, thank you very much, Cathology. Have a good evening. Go have a pint. I will do. But yeah, very, very interesting. And like I say, these are all obviously Metro mayors currently talking about this. So let's go diving into this then. So this is from Total Telecom. Northern mayors talk levelling up frustration at Connected North. With the levelling up agenda be transformational for northern communities, or is it just more hot air from the UK government? It's hot air. We've known that from the start. Like I say, most of what is in actual the levelling up white paper we just saw is exactly the same of what Cameron and Osborne put out in their white paper about the Northern Powerhouse. And again, the Northern Powerhouse never happened, except Leeds got a new exit to the train station. And I think there was like 2 other things that got built under the Northern Powerhouse name. But other than that, that was it, So, when discussing connectivity projects and investments in the North, the topic of a North-South divide is never far away. The government's levelling up agenda, announced earlier this year, is the latest initiative to try and address this regional disparity. But just how successful will this be? Not very successful at all. Let's face it. We've seen the white paper. We've seen and been through that opening paragraph. Again, coming from a Tory government, it's saying, oh yeah, there's all this economic disparity. We know that people aren't benefiting from the same prosperity as, people where we've concentrated pretty much all the wealth. So why don't you do anything about it? Where is all the policies about spreading the wealth? Where's all the policies for like investment? Where's all this, policy money? It's very simple, and it's the classic, all talk and no bite when it comes to it. Sorry, all bark and no bite. That's it. Let's get the phrase right. So, Tracy Barham, the mayor of the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, noted the impact of Brexit on the North, suggesting that the government needs to do more to boost investment. She said, "It's really frustrating to be promised the equivalent of EU funding, but in West Yorkshire, we've only received 2/3 of that from the UK government," said Barham. Every decision the government are making means that we are back of the queue when it comes to funding, discussions, and inspiration. It sometimes feels like the metaphorical part of the head, a metaphorical pat on the head, that we should be grateful that we get anything from the government, she added. Levelling up is seen by people of West Yorkshire just as a load of more hot air from the government. And again, these are where these red wall seats, that if the Tories hope to even keep in power, they have to win. They have to hold these seats if they are to remain in power. And considering this, that a lot of the red wall Tories got into power on the back of Boris Johnson's promising of levelling up. We're going to give all your communities all this new extra cash. It's going to be great. And of course, this funding hasn't come through. And the people of the North are very, very annoyed. Very, very annoyed. So even if some of these red wall Tories do somehow manage to survive, the chances of them getting a term after that will be even very, very more doubtful. Because again, they promised they would level up these areas and sort of invest or have all this money in investment. That hasn't happened. Councillor Bev Craig, leader of the Manchester City Council, agreed, saying that there is no one that fundamentally disagrees with the premise of levelling up. But, and this is always the big key, but for it to be effective, it needs to be a vehicle for change within the government itself. Structurally, as a country, no one disagrees that we should be spending the same per head across the nation, said Craig. But unless levelling up changes the Treasury and how departments operate, it will be confined to history as just quickly as the local industrial strategies were. Again, it's going to be very, very much consigned to history as a complete failure. Like I say, we've seen this before. People in the North are all far too aware of these promises of levelling up because they heard them all before from Cameron and Osborne. With the promise of the Northern Powerhouse, these promises that Johnson has made were just rehashed. And again, the people of the North want their money. You said, vote for us, we'll improve your area. That hasn't happened. But levelling up is more than just assuring equitable investments and focus from the government. It is also about developing the region in terms of digital skills and shrinking the digital divide. Critically, it is about more than just ensuring a high-quality internet infrastructure is available and affordable. It needs to be accessible by all parts of society to meet their individual needs. It's the obvious problem of the digital exclusion is to do with price. But it's also to do with homelessness, mental health, learning difficulties, and a host of other factors, said Barwin. Noting that encouraging digital skills was vital for community development, we need soft skills for hard time. Naturally, of course, this is a huge challenge for regions across the North, where isolated communities are all too often left behind in terms of national infrastructure rollouts and, of course, governmental investment. Steve Rotherham, the Metro Mayor for the Liverpool City Region Combined Authority, emphasised the need for greater collaboration between local authorities, large and small, and shared key learnings and successes. We all have the same vision for our communities, and the digital needs to be at the heart of that, said Rotherham. So, yeah. Are we surprised? Are we surprised that at this? No, we really shouldn't. This is what we've been saying since the very beginning. Leveling up was nothing more than hot air. I remember even back in the 2019 general elections, going out to people and saying, Don't be fooled by these promises of levelling up. The Conservatives have done this before with the Northern Powerhouse strategy. Look how well that turned out. You know, congratulations, people of Leeds. You've got a new exit and entrance to your train station. Again, it was hardly, shall we say, the economic miracle, I think, that certainly the people of Leeds would have liked. Not to say, you know, the people of Yorkshire would have wanted either. But like I say, it's all about having the cash. It's all about having the readies. And very well in that white paper, it does talk about devolution and how important devolution is. But if you're not prepared to give these metro mayors the money they need, especially now that they've lost all that EU cash, and the way that the new local prosperity fund is laid out, it means that all these areas are having to compete for the same pot of money, meaning they could very well apply to get, I don't know, £100 grant for like a new project for their town that would, like, you know, improve, I don't know, pardon me, that would improve you know, employment or give people new jobs, all you know, all kind of stuff that a council might apply for. Under the old EU regime, it was, here you go, here's your money. Now it's like, well, you have to apply now. And the town next door to you is also applying as well. And so is that city. And so is that other town. And so is that village as well. So it needs to be a good application. And if it's not, well, they get the money and you get nothing. That's how the new local prosperity fund works. It comes nowhere near to replacing the funds that they said they would replace, because the Brexiteers were very, very big on saying, you're not going to lose EU money, we're going to replace it. Cornwall literally came out a couple of days ago. A lot of like Cornish council leaders came out. I think it was late last week or early this week. Can't remember now. I'll have to dig out the story. And came out and said, please give us the money you promised us at Brexit. Where is it? As we always said, you ain't going to get that money. You were crazy to think that money was going to be replaced. You know, it was a lie. It was a lie to con, you know, at least a good section of the people into voting for them. Because as Nigel Farage himself had said, the EU parliamentary elections were proof that at least if we did hold a referendum, we could mobilize at least 30% of the population on our side. What we needed to win was the next extra 20%, which is why, again, go back to the Leave campaign, and they are telling everyone everything. You know, we're not going to leave the EU single market and customs union. We're only talking about leaving the EU politically. We're going to stay in the customs union, but we're going to leave the single market, or, you know, we're going to create our own EU single market, or we're going to get this actually amazing sweetheart deal. Again, they promised everything to everyone during the referendum because they needed to get as many people on their side as possible. So they promised everything to everyone. If they had actually been honest, they would have never have won the referendum. If they had put forward the plan of where we are now to the people, never would have happened. Never would have happened at all. So that is essentially the Metro mayors talking about their frustration about levelling up. Because we've said this before. I've said this about Northern Powerhouse. The Northern Powerhouse, in theory, and what was put down on paper, was a good idea. The only problem is that Cameron Osborne, just like Sunak, do not want to put the actual money into that project that it actually needs. for whatever reason, you don't know, but that's the case, unfortunately. Go figure. But of course, we're now having a look at this, because if you're in the north, many of these red wall Tories promised people, again off the back of Boris Johnson, they were going to get all this leveling up cash. They were going to get all this wonderful money, and that your town and city was going to be leveled up fantastically. And Wakefield was no exception. But Wakefield, like many of these towns, has been completely and utterly betrayed. Just like Barnsley, Wakefield is crying out for investment into sort of to create new businesses, have new infrastructure, everything. It's an exact same picture you see all up and down the country of what towns and cities are crying out for. We need investment. But unless you're in the southeast, you ain't getting anything. Like I say, look at how much money is spent per head on transport compared to the rest of the north, the rest of the country. It's nothing. Same for investment. Same for, again, spending in schools drastically needs to be increased. But this is what happened. And make no mistake, I'm from the north. Wakefield's just next door. People in the north are not happy. They're not happy about Partygate. They're not happy about how Brexit's going. They're not happy about the lack of cash that they were promised over levelling up. Many people will openly say to you in the north, those who openly said, yeah, I voted, I was normally a Labour voter, I voted Tory. When you ask them, why did you do that? Their response is, they promised us a load of cash. That's why I voted for them. And then you say, well, that cash hasn't been delivered. They said, I know, I can see it hasn't been delivered. Hence why I'm not voting for them the next time, which is, again, good signs, because, as I've said before, Wakefield is going to be an important stepping stone. Remember, we've got these local by-elections coming up, which are going to be a very, very important test for Johnson. And this Wakefield by-election, if he's still in by then, of course, is also not only going to be a very important test for Johnson, but also for the Conservatives as well. And Labour need to hit this hard. They need to win Wakefield. If not, they really need to take a serious good look at themselves and think, why aren't we winning? Because if they can't win in Wakefield, then they might not win elsewhere in the Red Wall. So this Wakefield by-election is going to be big. It is going to be very, very important. And if the local elections do not seal Johnson's fate, this might very well do. As of yet, it hasn't been called. We don't know the date of it yet, but certainly something to watch. So, here we go. Much has changed politically in Wakefield since the 2019 election. In the run-up to that election, the Corbyn-era push for sitting Labour candidates to undergo a reselection was hardly the ideal preparation for a battle dominated by Brexit. In addition, Labour's Mary Creedy had voted with her principles on opposing Brexit legislation, which proved unpopular, of course, to the Leave voters. And some key figures at the Wakefielding Council, including the then leader, Peter Box, had privately expressed concern at Creed's stance. As the newly elected MP Imran Khan, currently awaiting sentencing for being found guilty of a sexual assault on a 15-year-old child, attacked what he called the Islington Remainers, as branding the Leave voters stupid, uneducated, racist, or wrong. Speaking to Channel 4 News, he said this: I hope that the Conservative Party will reorient itself entirely to the people, to the strivers and the aspirational. What the people of Wakefield want is a party that is going to be with them every step of the way, as they will improve their lives as well as provide first-class services in both education and health service. And again, what he said there couldn't be further from the truth for Wakefield. Couldn't be further from the truth. So after his election, Khan pledged to restore trust in politicians. That sure went down. I'm sure that pledge has aged incredibly well. I'm sure that pledge has aged incredibly well with what went on there. And of course, to bring investment and jobs to Wakefield with the Northern Powerhouse scheme. Again, Northern Powerhouse was an absolute failure. Osborne and Cameron wouldn't fund it. This is what eventually became the levelling up plan. Hence why Gove got the job. He's the minister in charge for levelling up. But levelling up what? And with what? As we've just seen those city regional mayors have said, we can't do anything with the money that you're giving us. We need more. So, since the 2019 election, Wakefield has had a Conservative MP and a Conservative majority government to deliver it. So, what has actually happened? Wakefield City Council, like all local authorities, have had to bid for a number of funding pots by the government. They've so far consisted of an allocation of 20 million from the Levelling Up Fund, 12 million to be spent on refurbishing the BHS building to house a museum, gallery, and a cafe, and the rest on finalising of the redevelopment of the Rutland Mills into a state-of-the-art media production facilities at T-Yard North. A 42.9 million, of course, from the Towns Fund to build a high-quality houses in the Kirkgate area, and 10 million under the Shared Prosperity Fund, of that has yet to be allocated. The total money comes to £168 per person across Wakefield's 325,000 population for this year only. And these monies are not recurring. They are one-offs. And while these funds are welcome, they are still representing a very significant shortfall to what was in place when Britain was eligible for EU funding. Analysis by the Northern Powerhouse Partnership showed that the Leeds City region, to which Wakefield belongs, was one of the biggest losers from the new funding agreements, losing a total of £77.6 million in comparison to the previous EU funding. And of course, 12 years of austerity and cuts have amounted to over a 60% of Wakefield's council spending back in 2010. And in 2012, the council was required to save £77 million in that year alone. Wakefield's current projected spend is £234 million. Now, that may sound like a lot of money to you and I. And if it was an individual person, if someone came up to you and said, here's, £243 million, you'd be ecstatic, you'd be elated. But when you've got to spread that around a town and decide which projects get funding, which stuff gets built, and then you've got to realize these pots of money are only one-off, then what? This is what we've said all the time. The Conservatives only really care about short-term wins. In the upcoming by-election, what we've seen there, those three things up here that we've just talked about, are going to be all the Conservative candidate talks about. Look about all this money that we've given to you from Wakefield. Look at all this money. but it's nothing. These are one-off funds that titles over, again, per head per person of Wakefield to £168 per person. That is not a lot of money at all. And when you've had to look at the amount of cuts that Wakefield councils had to make over the years, especially since, of course, 2012, they have lost far, far more than the Conservatives have, shall we say, dished out to them. Meanwhile, of course, Wakefield has been at the losing end of many of the government's transport decisions. Recent fare rises have seen journeys from Wakefield to Leeds and Sheffield cut, with nothing in place still to link Wakefield and Huddersfield. Wakefield was previously to be in line of one of the main losers from HS2, with the journeys from London expecting to lengthen from the city. And the news of the cancellation of the HS2's eastern leg was thus welcomed by local leaders. But little of the government's actually integrated rail plan seems to help the region. Again, this was going to be, HS2, love it, hate it. People have different various opinions. I think HS2 desperately needs to be built. We need this infrastructure. It's really, really vital that we have this infrastructure. But the advantage of, and what again they don't really mention here, is even though journey times from Wakefield to Leeds would lengthen, the people of Wakefield would benefit with a lot more local services. And tell me what is going to be better for the people of Wakefield. Longer journeys to London or a lot more local services? The local services would be far, far better appreciated. And unfortunately, they've lost out on that. Like I say, I'm a big advocate of HS2. Like I say, go watch the interview we did with Gareth Dennis about HS2. If you are a HS2 skeptic, then I definitely encourage you, go watch that. Of course, bus services. Buses also massively important. Transport. Public transport, so important to the economy. And yet again, Wakefield has suffered under the Tories. Meanwhile, bus services in Wakefield were labelled at being at a crisis point, as the local operator Arriva is set to cut several routes in and out of town from the 25th of April. This decision has been made directly as a result from the suspension of government grants designed to help service providers weather the pandemic-related disruption. What this means in practice is that on a route like the 110, once featured by Jonathan Ross on his Radio 2 show, people going into work on the buses now find themselves faced with either 2 or 3 or even 4 of these buses an hour not turning up. And that is massively going to affect the local economy. In this region alone, in the Yorkshire region, I've said this is a shocking statistic, but it's true. 1 in 5 people turn down a job because they cannot get to the job's location. Public transport and having public transport will help that number. But it's not. If you live in an area and you've got good public transport, the only reason you have good public transport is because you got lucky. I've got, again, where I live in Barnsley, I've got a really good connection, a rail connection to get to Sheffield City Centre and Leeds City Centre. It's really good. Not as good as it could be, but at least I've got it. But I'm very lucky for the fact that I do have that connection. Of course, a piece highlighting this by the Daily Mail's Paul Rutledge has exposed the disruption to the local economy, as the 3 billion figure promised by the government was retroactively slashed to 1.2 billion. So again, the government says, oh yeah, we're going to give you this money, and then quietly, cut a load of it. 3 billion suddenly becomes 1.2 billion. Don't get me wrong, and this is the thing when we talk about these big numbers. 1.2 billion is again a lot of money to you and I, but when you're talking about spending this money on towns and infrastructure and all that stuff, it's not a lot of money at all. It's not a lot of money. This is one of the things that we've really got to sort of try and get across to people sometimes, that just isn't a lot of money. It may sound like a lot of money because, yeah, it would be if someone came up to you and said, here's 1.2 billion pounds, you're not going to say no to that. But for a council who was expecting 3 billion pounds and then only got 1.2 billion, that just affects so much that they could have done with that extra money, that 3 billion, and now they can't. We've said it before. If you've ever been in work and you've priced up a project or a proposal to people, we've all been there in work, and you've gone, look, you want to do this campaign, you want to do it right, and you want to do it properly. It is going to cost you. It is going to cost you. Let's use the examples here. It is going to cost you, 3 billion pounds to do this campaign good and right, because you label it all out. Here's what this stuff's going to cost. Here's what it's going to cost to do this. It's going to cost this much to do this, etc., etc. And then all of a sudden they say, yes, excellent, we'll do it, and you'll go like, great, we've got that money to spend. And then they come back to you and said, actually, no, we're still going to do the project, but we're only going to do it with 1.2. And you're like, but we told you to be able to do the project properly. We need this amount of cash. I guarantee you, people out there watching right now, you have been in this position at work. You know exactly what I'm talking about, and you know what the consequences are of how much you have to scramble. Stuff you have to cut, necessary stuff, trying to plan which is the stuff you might desperately need to do the project versus, well, that would have been nice if we had the cash. How it works. The Conservative government and, of course, Wakefield's Conservative MPs have also worked actively to make the people of Wakefield poorer time after time. This has included voting not to extend free school meals to nearly 10,000 children in Wakefield over the school holidays, and making 30,000 recipients of the Universal Credit in Wakefield poorer by £1,000 a year. Meanwhile, reports have shown that the North-South divide has grown under this government, and new figures have shown that a third of all children in the district are living in families facing real financial hardship. Again, the Tories promised they were going to help these people. They were going to lift these left behind towns out of poverty and help them really, have something, really be proud and something to achieve about their town. This just hasn't happened. And it's not just Wakefield, it's everywhere else. And this is why this is what makes Wakefield. This is why Labour has to win in Wakefield. Because if it gains Wakefield, we have a really good springboard to go into the next general election and re-win the rest of these red wall seats. Because as I've said before, the Tory nightmare, that is the scenario we want to happen, of the Tories lose all their red wall seats and they lose all their blue wall seats to the Lib Dems. That is what we want to happen. That is the nightmare scenario. And depending on how the local election goes, that scenario may creep ever, ever closer. And if they do that, then the Tories will be facing a serious lack of, shall we say, MPs in the House of Commons, which will only be a very, very good thing, and will ultimately lead to what will be, again, if that happens, under the numbers that we see, what would be a Labour-Lib coalition parliament, which will be good. Don't necessarily agree with everything the Lib Dems do, because again, I think they're far, far closer to the Tories than people admit that they really are. But then that's a discussion for another time. Anyway, so while the government has been getting on with what it repeatedly claims are the people's priorities in Parliament, it is unsure just how much actually to match up the actual priorities of the Wakefield residents. Well, the People's Wakefield Transport Network is now in crisis and its people have gotten even poorer. The government has had time to pass bills to stop speakers being invited to university society events, a bill to make it easier for soldiers to commit war crimes overseas, and a bill to give Boris Johnson the power to call an election without consulting MPs. Whether or not these measures are of any value, they are hardly addressing the country's most pressing needs, and at a time when the vanity legislation is taking time away from trying to tackle real action on levelling up or the cost of living crisis. Wakefield, of course, is hardly without its merits. Its economy was recently, as of 2018, among the fastest growing in the country, including a very good burgeoning green energy sector, a booming educational and tourist sectors, and it is home to New College Pontefract, the third best sixth form in the country for achievement. It is also home to the TV presenter Jay McDonald, the birthplace of writers David Pearce, David Story, Stan Baslow, and of course science John Redcliffe, playwright John Godber, and of course Coronation Street Helen Worth. Well, you know, you can say that, but you know, at least we have Brian Blessed, you know. You know, you can't beat that, Wakefield. And we've got Michael Parkinson as well. And I think that's roughly it for like famous people from Barnsley. It also has a rich cultural heritage that includes Grade 1 listed cathedral, an annual long division music festival, and the ever popular Rhubarb Festival. The district's very sculpture triangle includes the Hepworth Gallery, which attracts about 500,000 visitors a year, and of course the nationally acclaimed Yorkshire Sculpture Park, and of course the National Coal Mine Museum is also part of the constituency. With the Cap College building right next to the Wakefield one and Westgate Station, it will be the country's first purpose-built performing arts academy when it opens next year. What, of course, Wakefield deserves is a government willing to invest the necessary amount to actually support this in its mission to take back control. And as politicians from all parties converge on the constituency, promising to listen and, again, register concerns, now is the opportunity to tell those in power exactly what Wakefield needs and exactly it will settle for no less. And, again, as we've said before, we have to be ready for this. Labour has to go in. It has to go in all guns blazing. We've got the policies. We've got the policies to be able to do this. We just now need to start telling people. And I said it back in the early days of when Starmer first came in. I said, look, what Starmer needs to do is he needs to release an early manifesto. Set it out exactly what Labour is going to do for the country. Spell out this is what Labour is going to do. And I think this Wakefield by-election is that perfect time, because we can spend the next 2 years up to the next general election just hammering that home, what Labour is, what it is going to do for the people of the UK. Because some of the policies that we have, the green energy economy that Rachel Reeves wants to build up, Angela Rayner has been easily done some of the best holding to account of Tories in the House of Parliament. We've got a fantastic business secretary in the form of Ed Miliband, setting forward his plans for strengthening unions. The only thing that's really missing is, of course, as I've said before, the decarbonisation of the steel industry. If they can do that, that would be amazing. That would save and secure so many jobs. But they really need to invest in that. And one of the things I think Labour should do, very, very sneakily, of course, is co-opt the phrase, take back control. How do they do this? Let's get some serious devolution going. Give Yorkshire its own parliament. Give these different areas their own local assemblies. Give them the power and the money to be able to make their own decisions. Then change the voting system. Change it from the first past the post to a proportional representative one for the House of Commons. We'll do the same for the House of Lords as well. Make that an electable body via PR. Bringing real change is what we so desperately need. So desperately need. And there's so many people on the left who are like, this is I hate first past the post, or I can't vote for Labour because they're not left enough. The reason why Labour has to be the way it is, and don't get me wrong, I agree with you, is Labour has to be a very big tent lefty party. Because as we've said time and time again, whenever there has been polls done on like the British public, where do you stand? Are you on the left? Are you on the right? Or are you somewhere in the centre? And remember, because we are on the internet, centrists are very sort of like a very meme-worthy, phrase. But in the UK and the electorate, no, it is always 25% on the left, 25% on the right, and a massive 35% in the middle as centrists. You have to get at least 10%, maybe more, for this to succeed, to succeed at a general election. I keep on explaining this time and time again until we change to a PR system where you can have those different parties, and then you can they make coalitions doing all that stuff. Oh, hello, V Crew. Is really everyone streaming at the same time? Well, this is my hour. I always streamed at this time. I had it first. But yeah, until we actually switch over to that system, until we get there, you unfortunately have to play by first past the post rules. I agree with you. I don't like first past the post at all. But until we change it, those are the rules we have to play by. It sucks, but those are the rules. And we can do this. We can change. Remember, all these red wall seats, they were safe Labour seats. If the Conservatives can do it, why can't Labour? Why can't the Lib Dems? Look at America. Look what happened to Georgia. Look what happened to Georgia. A state where no one was expecting to turn blue, but because of the hard work that I can't remember the name of the organization that did it now, the hard work that organization did, that the people in Georgia did, they were able to turn Georgia blue for like the first time in years. And it sent shivers down the spines of Republicans. You know, I was expecting, you know, Texas or Arizona maybe to be the one that surprised us and turned blue, but it wasn't. It was Georgia that came out of nowhere. So it is possible. It takes a lot of work. And the worst thing that the left does is it says that this isn't possible. When you've got the 2019 election, you've got that Georgia one, you've got, again, the red wall seats were, again, meant to be safe, you know, Labour seats that were impossible to change under a PR, not a PR system, a first past the post system. It can be done, but we have to be willing to put the work in. Because, you know, if you're not willing to put the work in, then we ain't ever going to change from a first past the post system. And remember, Labour for PR, an organisation that was laughed at, said you will never get more than 80 local local Labour Conservative parties to vote in favour of changing the system to a PR system. There are over 312 local Labour parties that have now passed that amendment. And that is down to the hard work that people have done to achieve that. Politics is boring. And I will admit, politics can be really boring sometimes, but I try and make it interesting for you guys. You know, and at least I hope I do. But it is important. Politics is damn important because it has so much effect on so many different people's lives, and you can improve so many people's lives. Like I say, let me bring it out. This, paint your town red. Unfortunately, it's green. You know, paint your town red. Always talk about this book. If you want to make a difference and you live in the UK and you're, you know, in your locality, look at this. This is how, and lays out the story of how Preston changed itself around. And the tagline for the book is how Preston took back control and your town can too. And it is all about community wealth building. That is one thing Labour is going for, community wealth building. And these ideas have spread from Preston. Wakefield is doing some of them. My own town is doing some of them. A lot of, you know, local councils are doing these if they're Labour controlled. It tells you, first of all, how Preston did it, the policies, how you can do this too in your own town, and you do not even have to run for local election. It tells you how you can lobby your councillors to adopt some of these proposals. So I tell you now, even if you are not a UK resident, I urge you, read this book or get this book if you can. You can get it on Audible. You can get a physical copy like I've got. It's really good. Everyone, I think, on the left should have a copy of this book. Because just as, you know, a lot of people only seem to think in terms of sort of like the general election is like the important be all and end all, local politics is just as important as well, because you can make a change to your town at a local level as well. But you have to be willing to work and campaign for it. So with that, as always, as I proselytize to you all once again the importance of, again, getting involved, not only in your little local area, but in the national policies as well. I'm a massive advocate of, you know, go and join, you know, a local party. There's local elections happening in your area. Even if you want to support an independent, reach out to them and say, hey, local independent guy, do you want to, you know, do a leaflet dropping? Get in contact with them. Go and do it. You know, get involved. So, as always, thank you very much once again for one and all coming to join me this wonderful Wednesday evening. Hope you've learned a bit of something about leveling up and how important it really is, especially to the north. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. I don't know what we'll be covering next Wednesday. Maybe we'll go back to covering George Galloway. We'll see. Because he did a very interesting video recently, which I was just tempted to do today, but I thought no, I want to do this instead because we've I want to do something that really means sort of something to sort of me, and hopefully I can encourage other people to sort of do as well in the UK. So as always, thank you very much for watching. As always, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button on your way out. And of course, Saturday, we've got the Good Morning Walk. If you want to see me walk around the field talking politics, as always, Saturday morning, 8 o'clock. See you there. And of course, we've got other videos coming out this week as well, more about politics. But as always, thank you very, very much for joining us this evening. And we'll see you again very, very soon.